I'd like you to start by opening up the document art186shapetools.ai. The document may open up to Artboard 1, which we worked with in the previous lesson. If that's the case, just go to Artboard 2, which is balloons. You can also select your artboard down here at the bottom of your screen. You can navigate between different artboards, so that's kind of handy to be able to do. I'd like to point out a little about how this document is set up. I have created various layers in this document, and you can access them from the Layers palette. We have been working in the layer My Work, and these other layers, such as the template layer, holds the template, and I can turn those on and off by hitting the little eyeball. And I can lock and unlock them by hitting the lock key here. I just unlocked the template layer because I want to show you something. I'd like to explain how layer color functions. If I go to my ellipse tool by typing L, and I'm in my layer here, My Work, which has a red indication, and if I draw an ellipse, you can see that it is selecting in red. Now this does not affect the print color or the end appearance of the artwork. It's just to help you keep organized. And if I hit my V key to go to the selection tool, you can see my bounding box shows up in red. I've unlocked my template layer here, and I'm going to take this little red selected art indicator, because when I selected this little red box popped up. Now I can actually drag items between layers. Just dragging this into the blue template layer, and you can see that now the bounding box and the selection indicator are blue. We'll be talking a lot more in the future about layers because layers are very, very handy and we use them a lot, but this is just a little introduction. Now I'm going to relock that template layer so that anything I do on top of it doesn't affect it. And I'm just going to delete that ellipse by hitting the delete key up on my keyboard. So the first thing that we want to do, now I've already got my ellipse tool. If you don't have yours, just type L and you should be able to get to it. And let's go up here to our crosshairs and hold down our shift key and draw a circle. Now you'll notice I have the default fill of white and stroke of black here. But in this particular case, I want no fill. I want to be able to see my grid through this circle. So if I go up here into my control panel, I can access my swatches palette, and I can just click none here. And now it's going to be transparent. V key to take that away. V, there we go. And I just want to make a copy. Well, actually, I'm just going to move it. I don't really need to make a copy. So I'm going to start moving it over here, and you'll notice it's kind of going up and down, depending on where my mouse goes. But if I hold my shift key, it's constrained, like it's on a track, and it's just going to go in one direction. So I want to keep it level. That's what I'm going to do. Now I've got my bounding box here, and what I want to do is scale it in to be a narrower ellipse, so it's not a circle. And if I grab the side of this, it scales it, but I'm trying to match my template there, and this isn't really working exactly the way I want. However, if I hold down my Option key, that forces it to scale from the center, and that's what I want to do. So I'm just going to scale it down like that. I have a nice little ellipse there. I'll hold down my Shift key and move it over here again. I don't really need a copy, so I'm just going to move it rather than copy it. Now I'm going to make my little triangle here. So I need my polygon tool. And there are a couple of ways we can approach this. As we learned in the previous lesson, if I start drawing out a polygon and I hit my down arrow key, it will eventually go down to a triangle. And if I hit my shift key, it'll level it. And actually, if I want to move it up to this location, if I hold down my space bar, I've still got my mouse button held down, I can move it while I'm drawing it. And this is important because the minute that I release my mouse button, it's drawn and I won't be able to use the arrow keys on it anymore. I'll have to change it in other ways. However, there is another way that I can use the polygon, and that is by going onto my artboard here and just clicking rather than clicking and dragging. So if I just give one click, I get this dialog box, which allows me to specify the number of sides. In this case, I can change from 3 to 4 and back to 3. 3 is what I want. And it gives me the radius or the size. And I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller by deleting those numbers. So it's 1 pica 5. You may recall that we learned in the previous lesson that there are 6 picas in an inch and 12 points in a pica. So that's a little bit more than a sixth of an inch. I'm going to click OK. And that creates a triangle in a different way. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to align the triangle to the ellipse to get them aligned vertically so that we can create our balloon. And I want to explain a little bit about how the align tools work. So I'm going to hold down my option key here and make 4 shapes so I have something to play with. And click off to deselect. And I want you to take a look up here in my control panel and see how that information changes when I select these 4 shapes. Notice right here I've got document setup and preferences and style, and look what happens when I select these 4 little triangles. Wow, everything changed. And these functions up here are called align and distribute, and they allow me to change the relationship of these little triangles to each other. There is a default selection that says they're going to align to selection rather than key object or artboard. And I'm going to leave it on the default, which is aligning them to each other basically. And these are very useful little features. This functionality also exists in the Align panel, which is available under the Window menu. But sometimes it is easier to access them up here. And the reason that this has popped up is that Illustrator sees that they have multiple objects selected, and it's saying, wow, maybe you want to align them. And it just gives me different options. I can click there. It aligned them all to the left. Command Z to undo. It'll align them all to the top. Command Z to undo. Can align them to the center. And it can also distribute. So these are really great options, and especially if you're doing something that has repetitive shapes, these can just be a real boon up here. So we love the align functions. I'm going to delete that now. And what I'm going to do is just select my triangle and my ellipse. And I'm going to kind of look up here and guess which one of these is going to work for me. And I think horizontal align center. And that worked perfect. That gave me exactly what I wanted. So now what I need to do is I want to go from this, where I have 2 separate shapes, to this, where I just have 1 contiguous shape. And that's very easy to do using a wonderful new tool that came into Illustrator in version CS5, the Shape Builder tool. And if I select that tool there, it's very important that my 2 shapes be selected, otherwise Illustrator will not know what I want to combine, but they are selected. And notice as I mouse over, I get like a kind of a black grid here. And if I just click down and drag, Illustrator combines those 2 shapes. Perfect, perfect. I'm going to drag a copy down here, and I just want to point out, I'm going to drag a second copy, that Illustrator can also use this tool to subtract shapes. And it's a little bit different. Go to the Shape Builder tool and notice that I have a little plus next to my cursor here. But if I hold down my Option key, I get a little minus. And if I drag across there, it actually takes a bite out of my balloon, which is kind of interesting. So the Shape Builder tool is very versatile, and I think that you will really love working with it once you get used to it, because people who've been using Illustrator for a long time feel that this is something we wanted a long, long time ago. So I'm just going to delete that. Now I'm going to hit V to get back to my selection tool, and I'm going to pull my balloon down here. I think I'll hold down the Option key to make a copy so I still have my original. And what we're going to do is put some cool gradients in our balloon to give it a little bit of color. Right now it has no fill, but I can go up into my control panel here and I can click, and you'll see that I have a whole bunch of little radial gradients that I have already put in this document, and I'm going to show you in a minute where I got those. But I can fill my balloon with whatever color I want, kind of like that color. That's good. And I'm going to go up here and I'm going to remove the stroke, because I don't really think a balloon looks very good with a black outline. So I've got a very nice looking balloon here. I'm going to make a few copies, holding down my Option key. And I'll make them different colors. Let's see, about bright red. And yellow. That's good. I'll be talking more about gradients in another lesson. Illustrator ships with some very extensive swatch libraries, and you can access them down at the bottom of the swatch palette here if you hold that down. There's a huge library of gradients here, some of which are very nice. I particularly love the metals gradient. But the ones that we are using today just came from Simple Radial. So now I'd like to put strings on my balloons, and I'm going to just draw them very quickly using this little pencil tool here. First thing that I need to do is set up my stroke and fill. I don't want any fill, so I'm going to go to the fill box and set none, into my stroke box, and I'm just going to pick this kind of stringy gray color. So that's good. Now if I type N on my keyboard, that takes me to my pencil tool, and I should be able to just very quickly sketch a kind of free-form string for each one of my balloons. Now I'd like to group the balloon and the string, so if I move my balloon, it doesn't lose its string. So I'm just going to select those and go here to Object, Group. I can also do that from the keyboard more quickly. Just select the two and go Command G, Command G, Command G. Now I can move these around. I can Option drag to make copies. I can scale them. I want to make sure it's proportional. I hold down my Shift key. I can make all kinds of scenes with my balloons here. In another lesson, we will look at how to add transparency to our balloons and how to create a pattern out of our balloons.